Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Healed and Chilled. And today we have yet another wonderful, amazing special guest. And of course, you guys know I like for the guest to have control of the narrative. So please, if you would, can you introduce yourself from your own words and your own point of view? And then we'll dive right into the interview.
Hello, everybody, and happy Sunday to you. I'm recording this on a Sunday. I am a parent, a grandparent, a children's book author, a speaker, a historian by academic training, and a retired educator of 40 plus years.
Wow.
So, my mission today is to address the needs of children, particularly in the educational system today, which has a lot of flaws. And I write books to entertain, but also educate and inspire children to become
Mm,
tomorrow's leaders. And in
yes.
addition to that, I try to provide parents and teachers with practical tools and strategies to achieve those aims. So, in a nutshell, that's what I'm doing today.
Well, that's marvelous and wonderful. And as a children's confidence coach, I can definitely appreciate anyone who is out here trying to help the next generation of leaders thrive and become their best self. So I'm curious to know, how did you go from like historian and like on the teacher side to say, you know what, I want to start a children's series? What was that time frame, and how did you come up with the series?
Well, the children's book author phase began when I formally retired from teaching.
Okay.
The retirement did not last very long. I was not going to be one of these sit in the chair and just relax. But I wanted to combine my passions, which are, of course, history, because my graduate and undergraduate training was in history, and I've always
Okay.
loved history and travel. But I wanted also to use my 40 years of experience with children in education, and I worked with children in the general population and children with special needs.
Okay.
As time went on, I became very much aware of a lot of the problems of the educational system and how it wasn't addressing the needs of kids and their learning styles. And
Yeah.
our system has become bogged down with administration, testing, and
Yeah.
all kinds of things that don't really benefit children. So I wanted to address that, and I wanted to also use my love of history. So I decided I wanted to write children's history books, but with some of the more practical skills that I think children need in learning
Mm.
today. So I set about to do that, but I got a lot of help from my husband, who happens to be an artist. And he
Oh,
got the idea as one of the tools to make it more fun to create a character who would narrate and allow the children to see themselves a bit in the character
mm,
and to actually visualize themselves being on the journey and participants in the process. So he created a character called Little Miss History. And you can see in the book covers behind me,
mhm,
a Little Miss History is a kind of cartoon character who is one who wants to have fun with kids, but who also wants to make them think.
mm.
So he created this character on a younger version of me. So she has rose colored glasses because she tries to maintain an optimistic view of the world. She's
Oh,
dressed in this kind of hiker camping national park type outfit. And she loves the outdoors. She loves to travel. She loves to explore. She wears these oversized boots, and they're in memory of my father and his big feet.
oh,
And I used to go hiking, so they're all kind of a part of me, but exaggerated and made
mhm,
funny, so that any reader can kind of visualize something of themselves in this character. So that's how the series started, and I began with something very iconic and familiar, Mount Rushmore. So my first book was about Mount Rushmore.
Mm.
And a lot of my books involve national parks and the outdoors because that also accentuates the fact that kids love to be adventurers.
Yeah.
So that began the series. And now, 17 books later, I'm still writing. And the books have become a hit with parents as well as the kids because a lot of I try to find things that were forgotten in history or ignored in
Mm.
history, and I'll bring forth people that most people may not have heard of,
Mm.
like for instance, Alonzo Swan, who was on the Intrepid, and during World War II, he and his battery, which at the time was segregated, it was an African American group, was able to ward off a kamikaze attack. And most of them died. He survived, but
Wow.
he was awarded a Bronze Star for his bravery, but he he persisted because he felt that their achievement wasn't really recognized to the full extent that it should be. And 50 years later, he was awarded the Naval Cross. There are lots of people like that in history who might have been ignored or forgotten. So I bring things out like that. I bring facts out like the hidden room behind Mount Rushmore. Things that most people wouldn't be familiar with. And the parents love that in the books. And they also, a lot of them also use the books as a springboard before they venture out into these
Mm.
sites and visit them. So that's been an interesting part of the series. And some things are really random. You might consider them random choices, but I go to the sites and we take our own pictures. So not only does my husband do drawings of some of the people, and he does the drawings, of course, of Little Miss History, but we also take our own photography. So we incorporate all of that, and it becomes a multimedia approach.
Mm-hmm.
So you have photographs, you have portraits, you have cartoons of Little Miss, and then you have actual photography of places that we visited. So with the exception of the North Pole book, which we personally have not visited, it is our own photography as well. So it's very, very much a multimedia type of thing. And I ask the kids all kinds of questions, and
Mm-hmm.
I ask them for solutions sometimes to problems.
Oh.
So when we talk about the Sequoia National Forest, we also talk about the fact that it's so polluted and that
Mm.
it's sometimes unhealthy to breathe the air there. And then we ask the kids, well, what do you think? Can you come up with some solutions as to how we could make it better, how we could solve this problem? Or when we're talking about Native American rights, when we talk about the
Mm.
Lakota Sioux and how they were defeated and had to give up their land, and now they're trying to make their own memorial to Crazy Horse close to Mount Rushmore. We asked them what they think about that. We asked them about Native American rights, and and then we talk about the UN and what's going on today. So we try to really get the kids thinking and involved, and ultimately not only to become leaders, but some of them may become leaders, some of them may not, but we want all of them to be active members of their community.
Yes. Yes, yes. I love it, love it, love it. And um one thing that well, there's many things I want to dive into, but one of the things that you mentioned earlier was that you make a point to highlight parts of history that we didn't learn necessarily in school. And so I'm curious, why did you decide to take that route? Which I definitely appreciate because there are a lot of things like just in life in general that you don't learn in school. And sometimes you don't learn until you're up against the wall, like, okay, well, now what do I do? So there is like a gap in terms of like what we learn, and we're typically taught things that I feel will teach us not to necessarily be critical thinkers, but to be complacent with how things are and not necessarily to go against the grain or to make a new path for yourself or to be a contributing member of society, which you have to be in order to be successful in whatever way you consider success. So I'm curious, why did you decide that, hey, rather than adding on to who we already know about, why did you decide I'm going to teach the children about people and places and things that they might not know, or even like you said, the hidden room at Mount Rushmore. Even if you know about Mount Rushmore, I was today years old, literally, when I found out there was a room there. Like I didn't know that. So I'm curious, was it your being a history teacher? Was it because you saw that there were, or working with history rather, that you saw that there was a gap? Or was it just something that you were like, hey, you guys are going to learn this, but I really want to highlight this particular thing?
Well, part of it is because I believe that history is largely ignored in schools,
Mm,
especially on the elementary level. Now, when I was growing up, we had history in class from fourth grade up, and it was it was an important part of the curriculum. But nowadays, it's quote social studies,
yeah,
and it could be almost anything. It becomes more social skills than actually studying material facts
that's
and,
true.
important people and events. But not so much that. I think that children need to see history as a part of themselves. So when you have a very young child, what is the first thing that the young child comes in contact with? The family. So the child
Mhm,
views history as a part of the family. They learn about their family's customs, their family's traditions, their family's uh, way of dress, the
mhm,
food they eat. And then as they become older, that who, what, when, where, and why becomes a part of them outside the family. So as they move into friends and a small community in school, they learn that not everybody has the same customs and
mhm,
traditions and food and the same way of dress. And they become aware of themselves as a part of a larger community that's more diverse. So there are things that they didn't know about before, but that
mhm,
they learn about now. And then eventually, when they get older, that becomes a worldview, and they learn about people in the world that are totally different from them, and
yep,
they understand that we are part of this larger group that is diverse, and we may have known nothing about them before, but now we see that they are in some ways the same as us, but in other ways very, very different. And I think that has to be taught at a very young age so that
mhm,
they can kind of get that mindset. So they uh, they can learn to ask those critical thinking questions: who, what, when, where, why, in the context not only of factual material, but in context of a bigger world view picture. And I think that parents have to do that today because it's
mhm,
not taught in the schools. So when we teach children the basic values, that's in effect what we're teaching them. So if we want them to become independent and responsible later on, we have to start at a very young age, even in preschool. We have to teach them that it's so important to respect other people who are both the same as us and very different. We have to teach them to be honest and to be willing to evaluate other people's opinions, as well as what they personally think and what's taught in our family. So we as parents have to show them that our view is not the only view,
mhm,
that we have to understand that people have different opinions, Now, that's
Yeah.
not necessarily history because we also have to teach them the difference between facts and opinions.
Mhm.
And that's never been more important than today in a world where social media is so much a part of their lives. So, what do they get on social media? They get mostly opinions.
Yep.
And as they participate more and more in social media as they get older, the algorithm is feeding them the opinions of the friends or the people that they associate with.
Yep.
And they get less and less of two sides of the picture. So we have to teach them that it's so important to know what's a fact and what's an opinion. And as a young kid, you can teach them that. You could, when they learn their colors, you could say, well, this is red, and show them the red dress and say that that's a red dress. That's a fact. You
Right.
can't change that. It's a red dress. But when you ask them what is your favorite color, well, that's your opinion. One
Mhm.
person might say red, one person might say blue, one person might say yellow, and that's fine. They can have that opinion. So we can teach them those kind of things at a very young age. We can teach them perseverance and the idea that they don't give up when they don't
Mm.
succeed. And again, in social media, it's not important that you're the best, but you as an individual have the right to your opinions and you have the right to try. You might succeed, you might fail. It's not important what somebody else says about it. It's
Mm.
important about what you do. And a lot of times we learn more from our failures than we do from our successes. And parents have to
Yeah.
show children that it's okay to fail. And today we have a lot
Mm.
of those helicopter parents and the parents who sometimes want to live vicariously through their children
Yep.
and want them to do certain things because they think that that's very important. Well, their child might not think that that's so very important. We have to
Mhm.
allow them to pursue their passions, to try different things, to succeed at some, to fail at others, and that's okay. That's, all a part of the learning process. And as a historian, you are taught to do critical thinking. You are
Mm.
taught that you have to get to the truth. So, in order to get to the truth, you have to sort through a lot of information and you have to go to those primary sources, the original sources, the letters, the journals, the diaries, what people actually said, not what somebody else said about them later on. And again, with the internet and social media, our children have never really learned how to research, to truly research. I grew up in an age when there was no internet. So I went to the library, I got the books out, I read all of the different books. Then I had to take notes and compare and contrast. This person said this, that person said that. I would have to take all of that information, sort through it, and come to a conclusion. Now, what do kids do today? They go to the internet, they type in a Google search, and then they get a result. Now, what happens? What do they do? They look at that first page, and they're probably going to take the first result that they get. They're not going to go to page 6, 7, and 8 to see what other information exists. So researching is a really important skill that again isn't emphasized today in our teaching process. And this applies to other disciplines as well. History is a lot like science. You start with a hypothesis. You have a suspicion about a person or an event or something that happened or something that is happening now. and you come up with a question, and then you go and you research to get information, and then you compare one piece of information with another. You contrast it, you look to see what seems to be the truth, and you test it. It's a lot like science. It's a lot like coming up with a hypothesis and the variables and seeing what's constant or not constant. It's the same kind of thing. But what's emphasized today in school is coming up with that result, not the process, not the how we've reached that result. It's well, okay, I need the answer. And unfortunately, the administration in the schools, that's what they're concerned with. They're concerned with the answers. They want to see what's the results of the test. How did we do on that test? Well, one test doesn't really tell you much. And the standardized test, again, is not geared toward the learning styles of different children. We have so many children that are ESL students in the schools. We have so many children coming from so many different cultures, and you present them with one piece of material, which obviously is not going to represent the views of all of those different students. And kids have different learning styles. Some children, have reading disabilities. Some children are kinesthetic learners. Some children are visual learners. Some kids learn best from auditory books and results that come through their hearing. So we have so many ways of learning, and we have to reach kids in the manner that's going to best encourage them to learn. And again, a lot of that isn't being done so bad because as a teacher, I went from general ed into special ed because I realized that so many kids' needs weren't being met. I went back to school, got a whole new degree, certification in special ed, and then I started working with kids with really, really severe needs. I'm talking about autism, uh, kids that were drug addicted, kids that had physical disabilities. And I became aware of all of the multidisciplinary approaches to helping them learn. And that made me even more aware of how the average kid wasn't being met with the proper tools that they needed to learn. So I'm a big advocate today of parents teaching their kids in a way that best suits them, whether that be charter school, whether that be public education, a traditional homeschool at home, or a combination of so many new techniques that have come out, like the community schools, the micro schools, so many different ways to combine approaches that are going to help kids learn. So I'm open to all of that. My personal educational philosophy today is that the money should follow the students, not necessarily be thrown in a big pot. Well, here's public education. And then if you want something else, you have to go outside and you have to find the means to pay for it. I don't think it really should be that way. I think it should be the money should follow the child and the parent, not the other way around.
Wow. And I definitely agree that there are so many different types of learning styles. And if you're not learning in the way that's the most common, then things can get missed. Also, I feel like I guess I was like robbed in some way because the way you're describing history was not necessarily how it was taught to me. We were definitely the Google children. Definitely less than now because now you can go to AI and just click, oh, what happened here? And then you can literally get an entire paper. But the AI is biased to some level because it's only basing its information off of what it was programmed to think. And so if you don't go beyond that, then you're only going to know from one person's perspective or whoever put information into the AI. And you're right, it is all about like the scores. And we were taught more so to memorize things rather than to truly learn them. And like later on in life, I find if I want to learn something, I have to reteach myself. Like, oh, because I got the good grade, but that was just so I could get the good grade so that I could get the next good grade, and then you could get the scholarship. And so it's all about how can you get the good grades to get to graduating college, basically, or graduating high school, not necessarily how much information have you retained. And I think that that comes into what you were saying, and I'm such an advocate on is critical thinking skills. And I think that that is something, especially now with technology, like you mentioned, social media, and the purposeful division of social media. Like, oh, if your algorithm sees you as this particular person, the only information you're going to be fed is the algorithm that aligns with your view. So it turns, like you mentioned, opinions into facts. And so if you're missing that critical thinking piece, you can easily get sopped up into sometimes like nonsense content or dangerous rhetoric or just different things that are not necessarily the healthiest. So I'm curious, what do you think, and like by your definition and how you see the world, what is critical thinking? And then why is that so important, especially now and for children into the future?
Well, definition of critical thinking is really the object of critical thinking is to get at the truth.
Mm,
So it's in order to get to the truth, you have to sort the first the fact from the opinion. So you have to eliminate opinions or things that are subjective. We have to teach kids that what somebody or what some group thinks is not necessarily right, is not necessarily, it could be right, it could be wrong. And following social media very often leads us just to follow the popular view. And that's very tempting
mhm.
for kids. I mean, because of
Yeah,
course they want to be popular. They
yeah,
want to be in with their friends. And if they deep down know that what their friends are saying or doing or going along with because it's popular with the crowd is not they might really feel that it's not necessarily true, it's not
right.
necessarily right. So that's a real dilemma for kids. So what do they do?
Mhm.
Do they follow their conscience and say, okay, well, this is wrong, so I shouldn't go along with. I think that's one of the big reasons that we have such an increase in bullying
Mm,
because, a lot of kids are afraid not to go along with the crowd and they feel that
mm,
there's safety in numbers. And then we have these big groups or cliques developing and we have kids afraid to go against the grain. But that's why I say it's so important for parents to teach them when they're young.
yeah.
And if you teach them when they're really, really young, before they get involved in that school environment, that's going to become a part of their being, a part of their way of thinking. So if you
Mhm.
teach them gratitude and to be
Mm,
grateful for little things, they're not going to expect so much that they have to be rewarded every time that they do
mhm.
something, which a lot of kids feel, well, what am I going to get?
Yeah.
I mean, if I get an A, what am I going to get for that A, you know?
Yeah.
And there are some parents that play into that too. It's fine to reward children for doing well, but when they feel that the reward is the end goal, not the
Mm.
satisfaction of achieving something, then we've gone
Mm.
terribly wrong, you know? So, um, having open communication with kids and, really communicating our values is just so important. And kids, that's another thing. Kids have to understand that parents are not necessarily right 100% of the time either.
Yes. 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 Yes.
We have to tell them when we're wrong
Yes.
and, oh, I made a mistake. I wasn't thinking. No, and sometimes they're right. Sometimes we're wrong. It's like acknowledge them when they're right
Mm. Yep.
and congratulating them for coming to the right conclusion. Uh, that of course that helps to build up their self-esteem and their self-confidence as well.
Mhm.
But there are so many parents who um, don't do that, and whether it's because they're so busy and they're just not thinking, they're just
Mhm.
not taking the time to do it. But kids don't come with the parenting manual, and we all have to learn by doing, and we have to
Yeah.
learn from the mistakes. And of course, there's plenty of mistakes that the parent makes along the way
Mhm.
as well. So we have to have this open communication with kids. And again, that's something that should be built as early as possible. And, when kids are 2 or 3, you can ask those open-ended questions. You can,
Mhm.
when they ask you why about something and you give them an answer, you can show them that maybe there's more than one alternative. Like
Mm.
they're walking down the street and they see a really old building and you want to encourage a discussion of that, you can ask them things like, who do you think used to live there? And what do you think they look
Mm.
like? And what kind of school do you think they went to? And what kind of food do you think they ate? Or all kinds of those questions. But you can, if they come up with an answer, you can always ask them why. Why do you think that way?
Mm.
Just
Yep.
encouraging them to always see there's more than one side, there's more than one answer. And
Mm.
if we do that when they're really young, and I learned a lot of this when I worked with preschool kids because I worked with preschool
Mhm.
special ed kids.
Oh, wow.
And that's an age where even though these kids had special needs and some of them had very severe special needs, they were they were ready for those open-ended questions. I mean, if you show them that they're important, that
Mm.
their viewpoint is important, you can inculcate that at a very young age. So all the more with a typically developing child, you can start those conversations, and you can, after a while, if you practice it, it becomes very much natural.
Yep.
Just walking around in the street, driving in the car, going to the supermarket, going to the doctor's office, looking through magazines. It can be almost any type of situation where you can incorporate that naturally. So it's not the kind of thing where it's going to take you a lot of time
Right.
to do it. Say, oh, well, I don't have the time to. You can naturally include it in your day-to-day routine.
I love that, and I love that you highlighted that you can ask children questions too, because you can tell, especially when they're younger, when a child is being talked to versus when a child is more like an iPad kid. I hate to use
Mm-hmm.
that term, but it's really obvious when they're younger, and then as they develop, it becomes a little less obvious just because they're talking to their friends and things. And another thing that you highlighted was bullying. And I think that I just wanted to highlight that bullying can be a lot worse now too, because you can get recorded and it's there forever. And someone can
Yes,
bully you. I saw a girl got bullied because she didn't have the new Stanley water bottle. And to me, it's like, it's a water bottle. Like, why does that even matter? It's like, I got this for like $10. It's just a water bottle. But to this young girl, she was so heartbroken after school. And her mom's like, what? Did you like your new water bottle? He's like, no, the kids made fun of me. And I'm like, oh my gosh. So the things that these children are being exposed to, it it can even result in them getting bullied, and the bullying can last longer because now you're not just being bullied by the people in your neighborhood. The person in your neighborhood could videotape you and put you on the internet, and then everybody's talking about it. So it's definitely a different space. But I really wanted to bring it back to, I just wanted to put that out there. But the questions aspect, I think that you're right. It is so important to ask children questions and things, because when they're younger, if you develop that rapport with them, if they are being bullied, they'll be more likely to talk to you about it. If there is
yes.
something that makes them uncomfortable, they'll be more likely to talk to you about it. And I always highlight, like you mentioned, that even adults are wrong sometimes. And I think it's so important to show that to children, because there are adults who have ulterior motives when they're interacting with children. And so teaching children that even your parents can be wrong, I think also puts into their mind, okay, well, just because this adult tells me that this is just between us, or just because this adult says something, it doesn't mean that I have to go along with it. But if you don't have that open line of communication established from a young age, they're going to be more likely not to let you in on things that they wouldn't want plastered everywhere. And you mentioned in your books that you ask a lot of questions. So I'm wondering, was that because of your teaching and working with children, that you're like, okay, I want to implement that into my series? And even it's kind of like your character or the books build a rapport with the children in a way, because they are getting to answer questions and share their thoughts. So I'm just wondering, what made you say, hey, not only am I going to create this series, but I'm going to add the questioning aspect to it? And how has that helped the children develop in terms of like critical thinking skills, or like our parents coming back to say, oh my gosh, this question that you asked sparked up a conversation, yada yada.
Well, both. I mean, I want to encourage them to ask questions about the material and to lead to more independent research on different aspects of the material. Now, my books are about history, but they're very multidisciplinary. Um, some of them are about national parks, so they involve the outdoors a lot and they involve science. They like Sequoia National Park, we talk about how the trees grow and the what we use the wood for, how it can be used as a product. We we
Very
talk
cool.
about the differences between sequoia trees and redwood trees. Then we talk about the animals that live
Oh,
in the forest, and the museum there, and how they can learn about geology, they can learn about animal life cycles, and so on. So they're very, very multidisciplinary. The North Pole book, we talk a lot about geography, the Arctic, the different countries that live in the region and try to claim the North Pole and why they want to be involved with the Arctic and the tongue. Like, you think this is a desolate place, but no, they have real reasons for wanting to be involved
oh
there.
wow.
And then we get into, of course, um, Santa Claus, and we get into the different legends
Oh
that
wow.
were associated with Christmas time. We talk about Thomas Nast and how he was the first one to talk about Santa Claus on the North Pole. And then we talk about, well, who wrote The Night Before Christmas? Was it really Samuel Clement Moore? But there was this other person, Livingston, who had a family of children, and he wrote poetry for his children. And but he also knew Clement more,
Mm.
and it might have been his influence that motivated Clement more, or it might actually have been Livingston himself
Oh,
who
wow.
wrote "'Twas the Night Before Christmas." Scholars still disagree on that. So we want to show them that there are different points of view, different possibilities, different things that they can go investigate and perhaps come to the truth themselves.
Mm.
And many different books, different ways of doing that. Some of them, like La Brea Tar Pits, we talk about fossils
Oh.
and the ability to go there, to walk and see these fossil imprints, and then to watch the scientists who are still digging them up. And they can
Mhm.
actually go to the lab and see the scientists working and
Oh,
labeling the
wow.
fossils. Fossils, not only watching the movies and seeing the skeletons, they can walk through a garden that has prehistoric plants in it. So
Oh, fun.
it's very much multidisciplinary. So
Mm.
even if their focus isn't just to learn something about history, and everything has a history, and they, of course, have a history too. And if we don't know where we came from, we can't understand how we got to today and where we're going from today.
Mhm.
So I try to give them that critical thinking piece in a lot of different ways that's going to encourage them to become independent and to become learners on their own and
Mm.
pursue whatever interest they might have from that.
I love that. And I think it's so important like what you're doing because it even sounds like it's a little bit of like a textbook for children, like giving the story aspect, but encouraging them to find additional answers and encouraging them to be curious. And I think being curious is one of the key characteristics for long-term success and just long-term doing well because if you're more curious about what's going on, you're more likely to dive into it. You're more likely to just be engaged rather than like, oh, this is happening. And sometimes like when we become adults and older, you can feel stuck in whatever situation is going on. But if you have a level of curiosity, you know, like, okay, I'm stuck right now, but I can figure a way out of this. I'm curious enough. I have enough imagination, enough tools and resources to find my way somewhere else. So it seems like your books definitely get the ball rolling on curiosity, creativity, even imagination, critical thinking skills, and it just sounds totally fascinating. So I'm curious, what like if you said, okay, guys, because you mentioned that you have 17 books. So are they in order? Or like if someone were to say, hey, I want to start this series, is there a specific book you would say, start with this one first? Or would you just say, go with the flow and pick whatever works for you?
No, go with the flow and
Okay.
pick whatever you want. I mean, the first one was Mount Rushmore. I started with something that I thought was big,
Hmm.
visual, and would be familiar to a lot of people. The second one was the Statue of Liberty.
Oh.
The Then I went on to different types of books. Sequoia National Park. That one was a national park, more outdoors, more animals. Um, Ford's Theater, that's an interesting variation too. Of course, the history of Lincoln, how he was assassinated there in the
Mhm.
Civil War, but that's also a museum, three different museums actually, where you can go to the Peterson House uh, and see where he was brought. You can see um, exhibits as to what happened after the assassination. You could see what happened to Ford and the chase and the eventual capture of him. But I also talk about the theater itself.
Oh
So
yeah.
we get into the history of the theater and how the theater was believed to be cursed because so many awful things happened there.
I didn't know that.
And we even have Little Miss History riding on a broomstick on Halloween with it. with the curse, but they learn a bit about the theater. Um, they learn about the curse. They learn about the assassination. They learn a bit about the Civil War. Then I go into some of the books deal with military history, like
Wow.
World War II, the Intrepid, and of course the Intrepid has a rich history with World War II, but it also is a museum where they can go and they can see the planes, they can see the space shuttle, they can
Okay.
they can go hands-on. The Explorium has a hands-on deck where they can go, they can sit in a helicopter from the Vietnam War. They can
Okay.
see movies of the Intrepid in World War II. They can climb into one of the older space capsules, the original space capsules. So there's all kinds of things for them to actively engage with as well.
Mm.
Uh, and then, again, traditional sites like Ellis Island, they can see how our in 19th century was our most active immigration period
True.
from Europe,
Mhm.
and they can see the pictures of the immigrants. They can see where they came. They can look at the old hospital where some of them were brought. And that, again, visualizing in so many different ways. And then the books they go off. They go La Brea Tar Pits, the North Pole. Those are very extreme cases, and just different. I use different sites that I feel would be appealing to kids, not only to learn the history, but that have various interests. So if the kids
Mhm.
engaged uh, in science and maybe engineering, they'd love the USS Slater because that was a destroyer, but they can go into the room and they can see the radio equipment and they can see the actual guns and the ammunition that was
Oh,
used in the war.
wow.
They can see the way the sailors lived. They can go in and see the bunk beds that they slept
Oh.
in. They can see the kitchen where they ate. So, just so many different ways for them to experience history, not as something that's a series of facts or
Hmm.
unrelated information, but something that was a part of so many people's lives and ultimately affected the lives of so many of us who came after them.
Hmm.
So it's not only understanding the history, but seeing it as a part of their overall experience as a citizen of the world, not only, a citizen of a certain town or a certain
Mm.
state or a certain country. Certainly that's all important,
Mhm.
but they have to also see themselves as part, especially today in the 21st century, as a larger world
Yeah.
community.
Absolutely. And I know you mentioned that like most of the books that you wrote, you've been there before. So is there something that happens where you're like, okay, after you go somewhere, you're like, well, I want to write about this? Or do you go somewhere with the intent to write? Like, how do you decide which site or which historical um point of view? Like, how do you decide what you're gonna make a book about?
Well, I first I pick things that I think, again, that would be interesting to kids with many different, diverse
Mm,
viewpoints. And it has to be someplace where I can get there. Most of these places, I can get
yeah.
there either driving or flying, or I have a brother on the West Coast, so when I visit him, he loves
Mhm.
history as well. So we
Oh,
will we will, you know, we will go on jaunts from the West
oh.
Coast. So that's how we did Sequoia and the Iowa Museum. And then sometimes I'll go from my home on the East Coast and drive to sites. But uh, I kind of decide ahead of time
Okay.
where, I want to do a book, and then I'll plan a trip within a certain amount of time to that site, and then gather the pictures, and then come back and start writing the information. And that's what takes a long time. It's uh, the trip, the information, but then putting it together, because when you write a children's book, it's not like writing a novel. You don't say, okay, I'm going to come up with these characters, and I'm going to make this a plot. You've got the information, you've got to decide for kids, what's most important. How can I make this understandable? Well, most of my books, the age range is pretty much like kindergarten through sixth grade for independent readers. And because they're
Mhm.
picture books, the younger kids learn more through the pictures and kind of grow
Mhm.
into the information. The older kids are able to read it independently from the start. But I gather all that information when I write. It usually takes 10 to 12 rewrites
Oh,
to
wow.
get it succinct, to
Mhm.
get all the things that I want to say in a way that I want to say them into that format. But then they have to be illustrated. So my husband will take the script that I give him, and he'll do thumbnails to come up with the ideas the way he thinks it can best be visualized. Sometimes the way I wrote it, minor adjustments, like he can't do the visualization exactly the way I gave him the script.
Mm.
So
Okay.
sometimes there'll be even another minor rewrite in order to get those visualizations to coincide exactly with the script and to make sense, in the order that I've presented it. So it takes about at least 6 months
Oh,
to,
wow.
you know, to get all of that
Mhm.
together synced, because from the thumbnails, then he has to do the actual drawings, the illustrations of the
Mm.
character, and
Yeah.
popping in and laying out the multimedia, the portraits, the pictures that we've used, and setting all of that up. He does the actual layout too.
Oh,
So
wow.
we publish. He has a small publishing company.
Mhm.
From years ago, he's worked for other companies, and he's also had his own materials out. So uh, he does the graphics and the layout. Then eventually that all gets put into an Amazon kind of format,
Mhm.
um, and it's published. And most of the books, well, they're available worldwide. They're available at Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Indie
Mhm.
Van, all the independent bookstores. But it's a process, it
Mhm.
especially with so much visual picture information.
Mm.
Those kind of books take a long time to publish. So I've been publishing since 2013,
Oh, wow.
and that was the first book that came out. And I do usually, on average, I would say about two a year,
Okay.
but
Wow.
it
So,
becomes difficult when you can't get the logistics of the traveling and
yeah.
the
Yeah.
writing and everyday life and
That part. Yeah, well, I have a few more questions just because we are coming on the tail end, but I'm really, especially after hearing a little bit more about the process, I'm curious to know what was it like when you finished your first book? Like, if you can remember how, like, when the first one was done, what were you thinking? How were you feeling? And like, what was that day like?
oh, it was partially relief that it was finally put together.
Right.
And it was really excitement seeing the first copies of the books when I got the first proof. they
Yeah.
give you a proof copy first to double check that there aren't any changes. And there's always something, something that wasn't noticed or what, like my husband will not, well, that should have been higher up, like a quarter of an inch higher up on the cover or, some such thing. But there's always something. But the excitement, the elatement, it's seeing it. And then um, going to an in-person book festival or a book
Oh.
signing, when you actually get to see the reaction
Oh,
of the
yes.
kids to the books, and that's always great. And like I went last spring, I went to a book festival, and a teacher came by, and she says, "Oh, I haven't seen this before." She says, "I want to buy all of them," which
Oh,
made me feel great. you
of
know,
course.
Unfortunately, getting the books in the schools is not always easy
Yeah.
because of the way that the schools purchase their books, public schools.
Mm.
Most of the time, the principal, or sometimes they delegate that to, if they have a literacy coach, they'll delegate that to the literacy coach. And they give them a big catalog, and you have to order from that catalog. And the catalogs that they give them only contain 3 or 4 publishers. They want to buy all the
Oh.
books from Scholastic and
Mm.
Pearson, and
Yeah.
and if you're not published by them, that's why you'll see so many of the same books in the public school libraries, because they
Wow.
come from those very limited, and a lot of times they're not aware until you go and they see your book, they're not even aware that it exists. And the same thing
Mm.
with getting the books at sites. My books, some of them are at the historical sites, like the Statue of Liberty and
Oh,
Ellis Island.
wow.
But if it's a site that's run by a conglomerate, you can't get the book in the site. Like
Oh,
if there's a
wow.
national parks bookstore at the site,
Mhm.
they will promote their books first.
Mm.
Because they have their own publishing and their own bookstore, so
Oh,
they don't
wow.
like having the
Mm.
competition. Or if it's a museum, like the Intrepid, there's this huge conglomerate called Event Network that controls a lot of the museums and aquariums. And again, they have their own buyers, and they buy only the books that they want. So it's a very competitive business, on
Wow.
top of everything else, just getting the message out there. So I work mostly with homeschooling parents, with parents that I either meet through personal visits or through my work, because I do a lot of other things. I have a
Mhm.
blog and I review books.
Oh,
I have a
wow.
YouTube channel and I do teaching videos. So, I meet a lot of my audience that way through podcasts or through speaking engagements.
Mhm.
So that's really the way I get most of the message of my books out, not through traditional, you know,
Mhm.
well, the schools are all going to order. The schools are all going to order those same books from that same catalog, no matter what.
Yeah.
Unless you go there, happen to do a visit, and they become aware,
Mhm.
and so, some sites don't want to deal with different publishers. They just want to order everything from Ingram, or they want to order everything from Scholastic, or everything from Pearson. It's just easier for them.
Yeah.
So they don't really do the extra work of seeing which one is of higher quality or lesser quality. They just kind of do mass order. So
Mm.
that's another
Mm.
issue with schools.
Yeah.
They don't really update their curriculums. it's just kind of like, well, we've always done it this way, so, we'll we'll do it that way
Yeah.
again, you know?
Yeah. You're, your Scholastic book fair specifically. Like they would come to, I remember to my elementary school, and they would set up in the library, and it was like the talk of the town at elementary school. But it literally was. And at that time, I didn't realize it was like a publishing company. I just thought, because I'm in elementary school, I just thought, oh, they're here to bring us books. But literally, it was a Scholastic's book fair. So you're
Yes,
absolutely right. I hadn't realized how competitive, and it's interesting because the more you know about, the more you learn about everything, the more you start to realize that there's a few people that or a few companies that kind of run everything in different areas, and then there's everyone else trying to uh, find their way. We are coming up at the end though, so I'm just wondering, is there anything that you wanted to highlight that I did not, or anything you wanted to share that you have not already been able to speak about?
well, I just like parents to become aware of all the resources, most of which are free. Uh, if they go to my website, they can not only see the books and reviews about the books and information about the books, but I have on the website littlemisshistory.com. That's all. From there, they can reach anything. So
Okay.
I have my YouTube channel where I have the teaching videos, not only my own mini teaching videos, but I collect videos for kids. I collect all, all trivia challenges, all kinds of things that parents or kids with different interests might be able to use. The blog, I provide information for parents, teachers, and authors, um,
Mm.
so they can get that information. And I also review 2 books a week.
Okay.
Um, so if they're looking for resources or books for kids, they might find that helpful. Uh, and my social media channels can be accessed from there as well. My Facebook, my LinkedIn, all of that. I have a very active Pinterest board. So
Oh,
if they're
okay.
looking for resources for almost anything, uh, for parents from the home, anything, but for kids as well. I have a million different types of things on the Pinterest board, and they can directly reach me from there too. So there's a chat right on the website, or they can email Barbara at littlemisshistory.com, and they can reach me directly. So whatever they're kind of looking for, that's the place to go to just find it. So in addition to, the information about the books, and a lot of that is my philosophy, the tips and so on. And I do also have a course
Oh,
that I
wow.
developed. I do it through email, so make it as easy as possible for parents on peer pressure. So I have a peer
Oh,
pressure course also available. And some of the things we talked about, like open communication and bullying, are involved, critical thinking as well, involved in that peer pressure course. So that's also available. If they're interested in that, they could email me as well.
wonderful. All right. So I have three closing questions that I ask everyone, and you kind of answered this, the last one, but I'm still going to ask it anyway just to close it out. But the first question, they're my cliche questions, is if you could think of a time when you were younger and you were in a dark space, what's one piece of advice that you know now that if you would have known then would have made that time a bit easier?
I would say don't be afraid to try something new. As a young kid, I was very hesitant to try anything that I was afraid I would fail at. So I was never interested in going out for
Mm,
sports. And
mm,
I was kind of afraid to try new things like roller skating or riding a bike. I had a very small group of friends. I grew up in a neighborhood of 6 family homes. My parents didn't have a lot of money. We
Mm,
were kind of lower class. So I wasn't able to do all the things that some kids wanted to do, like take dancing lessons. But I
mm,
would be, I would say that my attitude now is always to be curious, to try new things, and to tell kids to pursue any passion they have. But I didn't do that when I was younger.
mm.
So that would be one thing.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. All right. And then my other cliche question is the internet works in very, very mysterious ways. We never know who or what organization or who will ever watch or listen to this interview in the future. So, what's one person or organization that you would really like to interact with that could help you get to the next level or help you achieve a goal?
An organization, not so much an organization, but I would say one group that I've learned to interact with to help me get to the next goal as far as my writing would be authors. I
Mm,
think your fellow authors are not your enemy, not to see them as competition, but to see them as
mm,
your best friends because you can learn so much from each other. And I know uh, I've learned from not one particular group, but from authors in general, um, to just have see them as partners, not as
mm,
competition. And I've tried to help them. I've done some videos, and as I learned. Unfortunately, when I first started out as an author, there was nobody there to help me,
mm,
and I was totally on my own. Not being traditionally quote published by one of those large publishing houses,
mhm,
learning marketing, learning how to do social media, learning how to reach out to get the books out to different people in different venues. All of that was something I didn't have help with. And now there's a wonderful book, Navigating Indie World, that came out afterwards, and I would recommend that book to any author. It's by Carol Roman and Julie Gerber, Navigating Indie World, and that helped me with all of the things that I individually had to learn myself. But see people as support.
mm,
When you're working within an industry, don't be afraid to reach out
mm.
and then try to give back when you have
Yeah,
learned something and have been able to accomplish it. Try to give back to them as well.
absolutely. And so I'm going to give you, like I give my students, a signature round of applause for a wonderful, dynamic conversation. I'm so excited for your series. It's like it's like the only word I can think of right now is trend setting, but I know that's not the word I'm looking for. It's like revolutionary in terms of any book that I've ever heard of that's or any series that I've ever heard of, specifically for children. So just I'm excited to see what comes next. I'm thankful that we got to have this conversation. And you already said it earlier, but how can people find you again? Of course, I'm going to put your links in the description for sure, but just what's the best way if someone wanted to work with you if they had questions, would email or Instagram or Pinterest? Just what's the best way to get in contact with you? How
They
can they get your books?
The best way is to go to the website. It's just www.littlemisshistory.com. From there, you will see on the top all of the links. So you can click blog, Pinterest, YouTube channel, LinkedIn, Facebook, everything. And there's a direct chat that will pop up if they want to ask a question. Also, the email address is there for contact, Little Miss History, Barbara at littlemisshistory.com. And the books, the information is there on the different titles and a little summary of what they're about and some of the places you can buy them. So I think that's pretty much the best place to go and find anything.
Wonderful, wonderful. Well, let's all make sure we keep our rose-colored glasses on in this world and in this thing we call life and keep motivating each other. And like I said, this was a fantastic conversation. We're so excited to learn more about you, your story, and your books. And I know for one thing, I'm going to definitely be checking them out because I too work mostly with like the homeschool children population, and I'm always looking for new things to like relate to them with and discuss and always trying to find content that I feel is appropriate for children, especially in today's day and age. So I'm just excited that we were able to connect. And is there anything before we go that you're like, oh my gosh, I really wish I said this, but I forgot to add this on, and I'll let you do that. If not, then we'll close out.
No, I just am delighted to have had the opportunity to meet your listeners, and I hope that I'll be able to share something that would be of value to them.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you guys for the next episode of Healed and Chilled.
Okay,
Bye.
bye.